But we're going to begin with the latest in the war of Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine today vowing to defeat Russian troops and, quote, not allow anyone to annex this victory. This after Russia President Vladimir Putin delivered his own address during his country's massive Victory Day parade in Red Square. That's marking the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. Putin accused America, NATO, and Kyiv of provoking the war. So let's go to forward correspondent Tom Soufi-Burge joins us live from Kyiv, as well as ABC News national security and defense analyst and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Mitt Mulroy. Good to see you both. So, Tom, tell us about Zelensky's speech on Ukrainians' Victory Day. They, too, fighting on the Eastern Front, where the war against Nazi Germany was essentially won. How are Ukrainians responding to all this?
Yeah, well, so Zelensky made this speech, Terry, down on Kreshchatyk. It's the main avenue going through Kiev, walking to camera. A pretty powerful speech, really, accusing Russia of betrayal, really, for hijacking, essentially, the sacrifices made by the Soviet Union during World War II. Remember, the Soviet Union losses were approximately 25, 26, 27 million people, greater than any other nation during that war. So Zelensky basically saying, we will hold our own Victory Day when we beat Russia, and really criticizing Vladimir Putin for pushing false narratives.
So, Mick, I want to ask you about the battle as it is right now. So we heard from the Pentagon earlier, spokesman John Kirby talk about this is not a stalemated situation out there. He says it's a very dynamic battlefield. He says Russia's kind of plodding forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but that they haven't really solved all the problems that they had north of Kyiv, the logistics problems, the supply problems, the maneuvering problems, the communications problems they had. How do you read what's happening in what is the crucial battle of the war, it feels like, out in the east of Ukraine in Donbass?
So it is dynamic, Terry, and I think in some cases the Russians are taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back. I think most hope that the Ukrainians could hold this to a stalemate and perhaps freeze this conflict, but they're actually doing far better than that. Around Kharkiv, they pushed Russia back so quickly that the Russians actually destroyed bridges as they retreated, which would indicate they don't intend to launch a counteroffensive because they just blew the very bridge they would need to do so. So the Ukrainians are performing very well out there. And to your point of your question, the Russians do not seem to have repaired the problems that they had since the beginning of this invasion.
They have really exposed themselves. Tom, let me go back to you. The world thought of Russia as one kind of military power on February 23rd, and today they look like a very different one. So are they, do you think, does it look like, what are you hearing from Ukrainian government officials? Are they intensifying the assault on eastern Ukraine? What are they going to do if they get stalemated again out there?
Well, the Russians are definitely pushing for the Azovstal steel plant still, so that's an incredible story, right? You've been talking about it on this show for days, if not weeks, Terry, the fact that some Ukrainian troops are still in the tunnels underneath that plant resisting. But across that front line, across the Donbass, the east of Ukraine, the Donbass is about the size of West Virginia. The Russians and their separatist proxies effectively control roughly sort of half of that territory, maybe slightly more. And basically down the front line, there are major battles going on right now, intense fighting. You know, the Pentagon saying that really Russia is making slight progress, incremental progress, they say, but not making the gains that they would have expected, hoped to have made at this stage.
And Mick, you know, as Putin continues to blame the United States and the West for his own aggression, there is the question, you know, how does he get out of this if he doesn't get a victory? How does Vladimir Putin lose? It seems like this is a dangerous question. How concerned should the United States be, given what is happening on the battlefield?
I think we should be concerned. I mean, most analysts expected that President Putin would, one, declare some form of victory today during this parade, but it looks like even he, with the propaganda machine that he has, couldn't come up with how that would be the case. And a lot of analysts expected that he would declare war, which would give him the legal ability to call up more reserves and more conscripts. The fact that he did neither, I think, is pretty indicative that he might actually understand that he is losing this and doesn't know what to do. And that is a dangerous Putin. Of course, we shouldn't change anything. We are helping the Ukrainians put him in this predicament, but we should be prepared in case he decides to escalate this by using chemical, biological weapons, or even, small yield tactical nuclear weapons as a way to scare the West. We have to be prepared for that. I think it's been clear that President Biden has said that he will take action if those things happen.
Yeah, and Tom, the U.S. and its allies are imposing a new round of sanctions on Russia, biting even deeper into that economy, changing that country, targeting Russian and Belarusian officials, as well as manufacturers of weapons and state-controlled media. So this is obviously critical. I want to ask you about ordinary Russians. I'm sure you know some who on February 23rd lived in one country, and now they're in a completely different situation, kind of kicked out of the modern economy. They live in a very different world right now. What's that like for them? Have you got any sense?
Well, the world has changed for many Russians. I think particularly wealthy Russians, well-off Russians who enjoyed buying Western goods, traveling around the world. That is over for the time being for those Russians. I think, like a lot of countries, there are kind of two Russias. The Russia in the major cities, cosmopolitan, educated, and then out in the more rural areas, the poorer Russians in rural places aren't affected to the same extent, I think, by sanctions. And I think sanctions are interesting, right, because they are having an impact. They are punishing the Russian economy, but Russia has brought in emergency measures to prop up the ruble. And at the same time, even some of the sanctions, like take military hardware, for example, certain military hardware, like military aircraft, Russian-built, rely on American-made components. Now, the sanctions in that respect will stop those components being directly available for Russia. That should make an impact, but there are always indirect routes. So the challenge for the West in every sort of type of sanction is to close off the loopholes, make sure that Russia can't get around the sanctions.
Very interesting, though, the way that it is affecting the society and perhaps the military as well. Tom Soufi-Burridge, Mick Mulroy, thanks very much. Good to see you guys.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.